Okay, so we started the week with the words of Jesus that he said. He prayed it in John 17. Then he said it when he appeared to his disciples after his crucifixion. He greeted them with those words. He said, "Peace be unto you." And then he said, "Follow me. As the Father sent me, I send you." He said, "Do the same things that I've done. You are sent as the Father has sent me." And the other way he said that was with the words, "Follow me." We're going to talk a little bit about that. So I've got I want to say it's a joke, but it's a real story. And I think it's Vannegaard wat gesê het, who said that truth is stranger than fiction often. But I listened, I watched soccer, and Bafana played, and they lost the last game. But they lost the whole series. Hulle het al die wedstryde verloor in that series. And it was a talk show. It was like one of these, I think it was an SABC somewhere or something, but it was like the top sport kind of sports panels. And it's interesting what the one guy said. He said, now that they're talking about this bad performance, they lost all the games. And the one guy said, you know what? I watched all these games. Bafana is not a bad team. Was only two problems. There's actually a good team. Only two problems. Only attack and defense. Toe val ek van die stoel af. Dacht ek my maggies. So what did they have? Did they have nice club meetings? Nice halftime? Was the oranges nice? The guy carried on the field. If you take attack and defense out, what's left? You could still look like a soccer team. You could wear the clothes. You could kick the ball around. You could have nice discussions about soccer, but it's the attack and the defense that makes it what it is. If you just take one of the two out, you don't have a game. And and I thought maybe that's the challenge of the church also, is to figure out what's the attack and the defense. And not to make as if the little meetings en die ou wat die lemoene opdra en die waterdraer and halftime, as if I think sometimes that the things that was supposed to support the game we confused it a little bit with the game. And I hope that some of the things that we talked about, I think some of it is like attack and defense. You really can't take it out. You can't take being a community that share out of being church. It's like, you take the most important ingredient. It's like, taking the coffee out of a cup of coffee, leaving the water and the milk and the sugar. There's no way that you can call it coffee. So you're going to have the most important things there. And I think having an inner life of prayer, having a secret life, struggling with God, you can't go without it. We didn't talk about it this week. I did write in the book, we've got that 5 habits, but the one that we didn't talk much about, maybe we'll touch a little bit on it tonight, is to be a peacemaker, to be good to your enemies. It is so in the core of Christianity. Someone said that without forgiveness, there is no Christianity. Even though it's a very difficult thing to do, if somebody really is unjust towards you, to be good to that person. It's the most difficult thing imaginable. Or to just let your bitterness go, your right to take revenge go, to let it become a peacemaker rather than to take revenge. That's not an easy thing. But without grace, without forgiveness, without self-sacrifice, without sharing, without love, that's the word for all those things, there is no Christianity. It's our attack and our defense. There's a verse actually in the Bible, I can't remember where, but it's where Paul says, he says your weapon for attack and defense is to do the will of God. Het julle al daai versie gelees? And sometimes people will complicate things, but I think the power of Christianity is in the basics. It's not in it's back to the most basic things that Jesus spoke the most about. And there's power in that. It's very radical, but it's not, it's a complicated world we live in. But it's as if the Jesus answer for the complicated world is a simple life. Minder materialisties, nie meer nie. Less complexity, more community, more sharing, not more individualistic kind of living where everybody must have everything, every possible thing and just strive for more, or whatever. To do a lot with little. It seems to have worked in the past. So I want to just say a few points which I think is important at the end of a week like this, where we all sit, it's Pentecost week, in the Dutch Reformed Church, in die NG Kerk het ons hierdie tradisie, het sit die week bietjie weg, and it's a time where we all try to just really hear from God and to meditate on and just get back to square one, check out the plan again, try to lose ourselves in God's dream again. And I think it's important at the end of this week, where a lot of us, in our hearts, we agree with the teaching. And you must please go test it. Jy moet asseblief gaan toets. Moet nou nie net hierdie lelike ou met die skewe tande en die lang hare vertrou nie. Gaan kyk nou vir jouself. Go check for yourself in the four Gospels. If it's really like that. That's why the first challenge is to read the four Gospels. But I want to heed a warning tonight, and that is that, you know what happens if you feel that God's turning something in your heart? He's moving something. You know, I can't continue with the habits I have. I'm going to have to change my life, but I'm going to have to do a few new things. I'm going to have to change direction. There's something, or maybe one or two things, that God really touched you in your heart. If that happens, and you don't act on it, you know what happens? You become immune against that message. Jy word heeltemal immuun daarteen later. You get, it's as if the worst people to talk to sometimes, sorry for all die dominees, but I'm talking about us. I sometimes have to do like a domine retreat. I just had a few years ago one day in Namibia, and it really didn't have any impact, let me tell you that. But it's sometimes the people that already have all the knowledge, and if you've heard it so many times and you haven't acted on it in a very practical way, as jy nie begin doen het nie. So begin Sondagoggends, Sunday morning's message was doing. Doing trumps all the other talking and thinking and feeling and whatever. A lot of things in the gospel make sense when you start doing it. Jesus said, I was hungry. You gave me something to eat. Not I was hungry. You had a Bible study, or you prayed about me, or you had a little congress or whatever. It's a practical thing. That something happens, but if you don't do it, if you don't act on it, then you become immune. It's as if your unconscious mind tells your conscious mind, I've heard it already, put it in file 2023, ek het dit klaar gehoor, het raak jou net nie meer nie. And it's as if it's just 'n eelt, I don't know what's that in English. Wat's 'n ding? Daai ding, ja. Ek sê dit verkeerd. Callus, ja. Ek is altyd bang ek kry dalk al 'n Freudian slip op baie enetjie of so. But it's jy groes eelt op jou hart. You don't feel it protects you, and it doesn't move you again. So you read another book about it, doesn't move you that much. You hear the same sermon again, doesn't move you anymore. You read the passage by yourself in quiet time, God's Spirit's moved, but you hoor dit nie meer nie. So I just want to tell you that you have to act. Jy gaan ietsie moet doen. You're going to have to say, ek gaan op my dagboek. I'm going to try to at least, and I tell you 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Rather make a small commitment to put time aside for prayer and keep to it, than make a big commitment you can't keep to. So say, if you do it maybe just once a week now, say I'm going to try 5 minutes every day. It's better than nothing. And you might grow from there. There's something you can grow. It can help you to grow more into that. I found that if your life is really chaos, and I heard a guy speak about this, and I tried it. If you have just a discipline with one of the stupidest things in your life, you say, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hang the keys right next to the door on 'n klein hakkie. And if I feel like I need to go to the toilet, I'm going to turn around and put that. I'm going to be very stubborn about always. Every time I forget, I'm going to start putting the key there. And that one thing that gives a little bit more order to your life cultivates the next one. And I think spiritually it's like that. So the big quest that we talked about this week is to show up and stubbornly to keep on showing up. Please come to the meal. I mean, it's a very practical thing on a maandaande or Eysterplaats meal, or join one of the. I can't say this at many churches I go to. I can't say join what is existing at the church, what's happening there. But I can with you, and we must use the opportunity. It's a great privilege. The things happening here. I went all out when I saw what's happening in your church hall. Ek het gesien Neil Stein is besig om kerkgeboue tot bekering te bring. Prys die Here, want die goed staan die hele jaar leeg en ons gebruik dit net nou en dan om 'n bietjie geld te maak. And so it's amazing what is happening, and a lot of other projects and things happening, and maybe wat jy kom ons van Blouberg af en ek dink Marius of wie ook al ook. Any church where you are, I mean, there's wonderful things that you can just say, I want to strengthen it. But I want to urge you to show up. Dag op man, kom eet saam. Wat's die ergste wat kan gebeur? Leer iemand se naam. Leer 'n ou wat op die straat bly se naam. Vryf 'n kind se kop. Ask Shirley's or Jock or whatever, can I help with the transport, taking somebody back? It's just show up. Do something with the little movement you feel in your heart, in your secret life, in your community life, and also in your public life. There's a lot of other things we can talk about, but I thought to end with this message, and that is the message that it's the most, and I said it that night when I talked about the dance, that we found that with youth in need, the thing that really changes their lives, and me and Shirley spoke about that yesterday night also, is when a child in need realizes that he or she is not only a person in need who needs help, but I'm somebody who can help someone else. I have a calling, ek kan ook, die Here kan my gebruik. It changes everything. It's as if our greatest need in our search for purpose on earth, our greatest need is to feel needed. Ons wil nodig voel. Ons wil voel ons lewe is nie maar net daar nie. We want to feel that my life mattered. And it's a lot about showing up, but realizing that God can use me. It's not only these few people who have a calling on their lives, but He can use, and He's been good at this thing right through the Bible. And the Bible is a story about that, of God using people, not the ones you would suspect Him using. The smallest son, David, he's the one who's watching the sheep. He's the one who's being called to be the king. And in die geloofshelde daar, en ek dink selfs in die geslagsregister van Jesus, ek het reg het, maar in Hebrews 11, die geloofshelde, staan daar Rahab, in die ou vertaling staan daar Rahab die hoer. Jy weet, die Here het haar gebruik. And she's named as one of the people, the heroes of faith. And I prayed it yesterday at the end. And sometimes you pray a prayer, you think, yeah, can I just sneak something of the message in? Lord, maybe you won't care. But I forgot to say something about it, that when Jesus really wanted to show what it means to give, and He said to give brings more joy than to receive. But when He wanted to show what it looks like, He showed a widow who had only a few coins left in a very unjust system, was giving those coins. He showed somebody that's really poor, giving. And I've seen it with people that really have nothing. I've seen sometimes the best examples of sharing community and giving is often to be found there. Let me tell you this. In Pretoria, we have die mense van die ooste. Wie van julle kom van Pretoria af? Julle sou weet, miskien is julle ook mense van die ooste gewees, maar ons is bietjie jaloers op hulle partykeer. We feel they're more wealthy and the churches are nice. Sometimes we would we would make jokes en dan sê ons, ja, hulle is so smart met nagmaal stuur die wynlys om. But if I want a lady, when I'm preaching in one of those churches, and there's a place, the Hector Peterson squatter camp, and if I want one of these privileged, well-off ladies living in the east of Pretoria, die wyse manne van die ooste, wyse vroue van die ooste. If I would preach there, and I would like this old lady to get involved with a grandma in the Hector Peterson squatter camp that's looking after 7 orphans. And she's begging in the streets, en sy het 'n bietjie marog en spinasie daar om sukkel om hierdie kindertjies groot te maak in daai klein shack. Sy gee haar lewe. If I want this lady from the east of Pretoria to connect with that lady in the Hector Peterson squatter camp, it is not only so that the lady from the east, Pretoria East, can help the lady in the squatter camp, but because I think she has a lot to learn from her. I think she can grow spiritually enormously from a relationship with that lady. Too often when we talk about the need in our community, we only think about the guy who's knocking on our gate, and not enough about, but because you have to travel for that, about the old lady in the squatter camp is looking after kids. And you must find a way on Eysterplaat or wherever, you must find a way to go and meet that single mom, that a person that's in need. You know, the interesting thing is that Jesus never said to the world to come to church. He said to the church to go to the world. He said, Christianity 101 is if you want to shine your light, find a dark place. You're going to have to seek it out. You're going to have to travel. You're going to have to show up. So, yeah. So the story of Peter is very inspiring to me. What do you think of, as Jan Petrus dink, if you think of Peter, what do you think of, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Just quickly think. Yeah, he denied Christ, yes. I wonder how we would feel about the fact that that's the first thing we would remember about him. No? But it is. And it's interesting because in all 4 of the Gospels, remember, the 4 Gospels is not telling us everything. Mark doesn't tell us anything about the birth of Jesus. Matthew tells us about the wyse manne. Hoe sê mens hulle in Engels nou weer? Wise men. Luke, jy sien my Engels is nou op. Luke tells us about the shepherds, but not about the wise men. And so the Gospels, you have like, we would always explain and say there's different people that saw an accident. Everybody's telling the story from where they were standing or whatever. But there's a few stories, like the crucifixion, that you get in all the Gospels. And one of the stories you get in all 4 Gospels, not only in the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, but also in John, which was written much later, is the story of Peter's denial. And there's quite a theory that Peter was involved in the writing of Mark, that he would use him in writing that, and that he put the story in of how he denied Christ. He thought it's part of his testimony that he denied Christ. But Peter's life was up and down. I was once in we're going to read the story of how Peter denied Christ just now, but I remember Stefan Joubert and them, they invited me to Israel. They sponsored me to go. It was wonderful. I loved everything, but it's as if that place where Peter denied Christ, it's an old church that's built there now, and there's a lot of things that show that most probably it really happened here where he denied Christ. They had a nice little thing inside the church, a lecture, and I went out because it was a big crowd, a lot of people, and I sat under the tree and I read this passage for myself. And I felt even a little bit emotional about it. I thought, you know what I thought? Because we're going to read it now. And it says at the end, Peter wept bitterly when he realized what he'd done. And I wished I could email Peter or WhatsApp him or get a message to him and tell him, Peter, that your worst moment, how much hope it gave to the church right through the church history. How many people like me never felt that God could use me until we read your story. You know, if you see some of the big things that people do, you feel, I don't know if I've got the guts for that. But when you read how Peter denied Christ, then you think, yeah, maybe God can use me too. Huh? Maybe if He can use, so God can use people like that, He can use me too. And that in a weird sense, that the thing was turned around, that God did that thing again in the life of Peter, and I believe He wants to do it again tonight in our lives, that He's done right in the beginning of the Bible, when He makes light out of darkness, something good out of chaos, something out of nothing. And He did it in Peter's life, and He can do it in our lives. I hope that you will not know it only with your mind, but that it will be a personal realization, revelation. But Peter's life was up and down. So Jesus called him. He was a fisherman. He had to lay down his nets. Okay, he did it. Woo! You could cheer for that. You know, it's like, woo, for the good thing and oh, for the bad thing. You know, we could actually do that. Then Peter is the guy who walked on water. When Jesus was walking across the water, Jesus learned about the death of John. He loved John the Baptist a lot. He heard that he was decapitated. It says Jesus was disturbed. He wanted to be alone in the field. Go to that lonely place to pray. But there was a lot of people in need. So he said, okay, let's first help them. And by the night, he was so tired of helping these people, and still he was walking with this emotional thing. It really says it like that in the Bible. And then he then it said to his disciples, I'm just going to pray now. You go across so long. And then Jesus took the shortcut over the water. And they thought it's a ghost. And then He called Peter onto the water, and Peter got out. He did the courageous, faithful, die geloofsding, die geloofsdaad. He did that, the deed of faith. He walked on water. And what's the next moment? It's the story of Peter. He sank. So one moment he does it, everybody cheers, the next moment, oh. But Peter, hy sink en dan gryp Jesus om wat 'n baie mooi simboliese ding is, that we can really hold on to. Then it's that passage where Jesus says, so who do you say I am? And then Peter says, you are the living Christ. And he says this beautiful proclamation of faith. And Jesus says, Peter, this is beautiful. It's amazing what you're doing. And what happens in the next verse? Peter says something really wrong. Jesus says, I must be crucified. Then Peter said, never, it must happen. And then what does Jesus say? He says, Satan, stand behind me. He's actually saying it to Peter. He says, Peter, you get it so wrong. I mean, you can't get it more wrong than Jesus saying, Satan, Satan staan agter my. Jy weet. So it's Peter, he's doing it, he's getting it right, and he's falling again. Okay? And we feel sorry for him, and for ourselves, hopefully. But they say, the heart machine, you shouldn't worry if it goes like this. You should worry if it starts going like this. It's a sign of life. It's better to try and to fail than never to try at all. He had an adventure, and the nice thing about Peter is he seems to kept on trying. And then he says, I will never deny you, Jesus, just before he denied him. And you would kind of cheer and say, wow, this guy's faith. No matter what happens, Jesus, I'll stand with you, saying the right thing. It's like these songs we often sing. And then the next moment, it's just dis net die kelnerinnetjie. And he can't stand in his faith in front of her, and he falls again. And then, let me read a little bit of that passage. But Peter said, and it's in Luke, I'm just reading the one here from Luke now. And Peter said, man, I do not know what you are talking about. Dis nou vir hom vra, jy's mos ook 'n volgeling van Jesus. And immediately, while he was speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. So most probably the jail was one of these holes with, but Jesus could see him there outside at the fireplace, denying him. And I don't know if when you were a child, as jy ietsie verkeerd doen, dan kyk jy mos, kyk jou maar. And it's as if Peter looked to see if Jesus was watching, and Jesus was watching. And then it says, and people remembered the saying of the Lord, how he said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly. I've got this picture in my mind where he just ran into the bush and he was weeping. He felt such a failure. And then the story continues, luckily. So, according to John, the Gospel of John, Peter became a fisherman again. It's interessant, net jy al ooit daaraan gedink? That Peter, when the last chapters of John happens, after Peter denied Christ, he's a fisherman again. It's as if he said it didn't work. Jesus was horribly killed. Remember, Jesus didn't appear to them yet again. They still believed it didn't work. He died. This whole king thing didn't happen. I denied Christ. He felt so empty. So what did he do? He just went back to being a fisherman. He said, ek sal maar weer daai gewone lewe gaan leef. And then and I tell you, I think for me, it's one of the most beautiful stories in the whole 4 Gospels, the end of John. Then Jesus is there, and he's standing on the beach, and they're fishing. And then Peter, John actually, they say the disciple that loved Jesus the most, or something like that, most probably John himself, the commentaries say. But he looked and he said, it's Jesus who's there on the beach telling us to throw the nets on the other side. And it says, Peter took off his clothes and he jumped into the water. Go read it. It's beautiful. He's again this guy who just full on, man, jumps into the water and he gets to the beach, and at the end the other disciples arrive and they have these nets full of fish, and then Jesus makes them breakfast. Isn't that beautiful on the beach? Hy braai vir hulle vis. Julle ken hy storie. Ek hoop laat ons die kinders nie hierdie goed inkleer nie. Ek het die storie bietjie later eers mooi gelees. And it says in John 21 verse 12, and Jesus said to them, to the disciples, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew he was the Lord. And Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples. But the other times, the story. And then he said to them, he talks to them there on the beach, and then he says to Peter in verse 19, he speaks to Peter, he says, it's that story where he says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter, can you imagine, he denied Christ, he thought it didn't work, Jesus is weg, dit het daai groot teleurstelling, en nou kuier jy met Jesus. Ek dink mens het partykeer so gewen, so droom in jou hart, dat jy net weer kan regmaak. En hier sit Jesus, hy het nou vir hulle vis gemaak. And Jesus says to him, Peter, do you love me? And he says, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And then every time, what does Jesus say? He says, laat my lammers wei, gee my skape kos, and so on. He says, if you love me, it's the thing that Jesus has always been saying, if you love me, love my people. As if my lief is, gaan sorg vir my mense. And then he says again, the thing that he said to Peter right in the beginning when he left his nets, when he was a fisherman, he says again, follow me. And then Peter again lays down the nets and he follows Jesus. And it's a beautiful story. Why am I telling you that? Because I think that second yes, Peter had to say, Jesus called him once to follow him, and he was all in. He messed up many times. And it's as if after Jesus was crucified, after he denied Christ, he gave up. But if you read the full story of Peter, you'll see that the second yes was the most important yes, not the first one. And I wonder, but sometimes, if some of us are there. Ons het op 'n CSV kamp by 'n sendingweek of een of ander erediens in your quiet time. There was a time you said that first yes. But maybe God wants to ask you to say the second yes. Na jou ontnigtering, na jy seer gekry het, droog gemaak, het self droog gemaak. al die ontnigtering. It seems to show up again, it seems to matter. And why am I telling you this story? Because Pentecost, Pinkster, wat ons hier vier, die vlamme op die kop, mense wat in verskillende tale praat, die kerk wat gebore word, the church that starts to change the world, it all started with a sermon by whom? By Peter. He's the one that preached on Pentecost. And it's amazing, toe kom ons met duisende tot bekering. But I think it really matters when somebody who brings the message understand the grace of God. I've been through it, experienced it. It's interesting that Peter is the one who sees the cloth with the unclean animals. You know, there was this story that the conservative Jewish religious oomies in Jerusalem, you know, they wanted first they didn't want the heathen, the Romans and the Greeks and so on to be part of the church. They said, ons mense eerste, wat ons baie hoor, vandag nog, it still echoes today. They said, no, ons mense eerste. And then Paul became apostle, and Peter and so on, they started to reach the other countries. And then it says Peter saw that a vision of the unclean animals, and God said to him, eat. And the meaning was, God's grace is much bigger than you ever thought. They are also welcome. Everybody is welcome. And I think Peter is the one who's carrying that message, who gets the dream about that, because he's the one who felt it on his skin. He felt what it was like to be somebody who's supposed to be rejected but who's accepted. He knew what grace was. And who could fight with that? Who could argue with that? With a Peter who's been through the desert, who's been through the darkness of his old soul before God, and came out and said the second yes. So it matters. I've got this motto in my life that rather go to God with your brokenness than with your promises. I've seen that nowhere in the Bible, and when somebody came with brokenness, God showed them a way. And we spoke about the rich young man yesterday, and I didn't want to say it yesterday because I want you to feel the tension in you. If you don't know how much grace you need from God, and it's like my materialisme is die plek waar ons dit voel vandag, die baie goeie godsdienstige mense. But it could open you that you will have grace for other people, that you won't judge that easily about others. And but it is interesting that rather go to God with your brokenness than with your promises. That according to the three synoptic gospels where the story of the rich young man is being told, every single time the story starts just after Jesus said, if you want to join my kingdom, you have to become like a child. And then the next verse says, but the rich young man came to Jesus and he did everything right. He was a religious man. He was obeying the law. He was successful in everybody's eyes. And I don't think it's by accident. There's a contrast between the child who has no entitlement. They say you have the entitlement of the strong and the proud. In my familie, jy weet, daai ding, in my volk. But you also have the entitlement of the weak and the victim that says, but, you know, I've suffered so much, the world owes me something. But a small child, I think it's Richard Rohr that showed that a very small child, 2 jaar oud, they don't even have a long history they can stand on. The only thing children are good with is accepting gifts. They didn't even come to Jesus themselves, their parents brought him. And it's as if Jesus says that if you can't come to me in perfection, you can always come to me in brokenness. And that's something. I spoke about the soccer game. You know, sometimes once I checked out the biggest comebacks. It's nice videos to see, hè? Selfs van die atlete. Ons het so enetjie van Damien van Eysterplaat waar hy agter was en toe vat hy hulle almal verby en toe wen hy hulle. Het gelyk of hy verloor en toe wen hy. We like those stories of the underdogs, hè? that so often in life we would hear the halftime whistle, and there's these stories of a German team that was down 5-0, but they won the game 6-0 in the second half. They said if these guys can kick 5 goals in the first half, we can kick 6. So I always wish I could hear the locker room talk that halftime, whatever they said to each other there. But I realized when I read the story that a game isn't won in the first half, it's won in the second half. Moses thought when he heard the whistle there in the desert, it's finished. He committed murder. He lived as an orphan with other people, with the Egyptians. He thought it's finished. But it was only halftime. Peter thought it was finished, but it's only halftime. And I don't know if it's good theology, but it seems like God has an A plan for your life. And if it doesn't work, he has a B plan. And if it doesn't work, he's got a C plan. And if it doesn't work, and some of us are at S or T, already. But you know what I say? I say, praise God for a big alphabet. Yeah. Okay. We always said that God doesn't want ability, all he wants is availability. So I hope that if you can't answer to this call this Pentecost week because you are strong enough that you can come to God as Peter did in brokenness and say that second yes. So I'm going to sing you a song. Ek is so 'n bietjie tens vanaand dat ek dink ek het 15 minute die hele jaar gitaar gespeel en ek het net vandag eintlik omtrent 10 van daai 15 gespeel. And I want to sing you a song. Terwijl verslaafd is dadigers, alcoholisten en daghaarrokers. Is jij een prostituut of een procureer of een speedkom? Een transvestiet, een geneer of een prukkelpom? Al die kunstenaars in die berenland, die boemenlaars, al die weerbenaps, al die zonde, die zonde. Gewone, gebroken mensen, verloren, verstoten wensen, zonder mensen. Welkom hier bij ons. Welkom bij ons. Zo blij gekomen. Hoop ik hier je woont. Welkom hier bij ons. En welkom bij ons. Zo blij gekomen. Hoop ik hier je woont. Jullie maar op tom. Satan is de agnosticus, de 7-dagse adventist.